again, at the end of the day, it's so exciting to have this plan that's really reflective of all the other things you want for this important part of our community, this neighborhood, which includes activation of community space and thinking about how you get around. And I won't go into the details, staff will do that, but it's such an important piece. So you'll hear from staff that those visuals have been taken out. We don't want that to be a distraction. What was meant to inspire, I've got it to be a distraction. But we want to engage and listen in these points of conversation, take the confusion piece out. I also want to emphasize on city-owned land. The reason why that's even something I'm bringing forward as mayor is because we can actually activate and leverage things in so many different ways when it's publicly owned, rather than a privately owned parcel for which we sort of buddy up, but we don't have as many points of leverage. And by points of leverage, I mean, what kind of housing gets built there? What kind of better use of a parking lot that we might own could be happening when we talk about housing? How do we build our public wealth as a community by owning housing and being able to not only keep stable rents or design the kind of sizes of units that we actually need, but have the public in the lead, not a private developer who's looking for profit or other metrics as their priority. So again, I want to emphasize that's what excites me, not only about this concept as part of our larger housing strategy for the entire city, but what could be possible out in the New North End where public land exists. And there's all sorts and types, so I don't want to lose that thread. You all know this is a housing is the emerging and emergency need in this city across the whole state. But I also want to emphasize, we're hearing from our team, a plan is, as Andy mentioned again, is not actual plans of like development plans. It's not actual changing of zoning. It is about the vision that you all want for this important part of our city. And they'll go into it more. We have a lot of steps ahead of us, like weeks of process ahead of us. So I'm glad there's no action tonight. There's no action on council on Monday. We have a lot of steps ahead of us. So I hope we can collectively take a breath together, do some deep listening, us as a team, me as mayor, do some deep listening, have some more community dialogue and meetings beyond tonight so everyone can have a chair. I will stand so someone can take my chair in a second. But we're really grateful that it all came out last week, tonight, and I'm ready here and ready to listen. Okay. And whoever has that 5-year-old, she was very brave, and I really appreciate that 5-year-old stuff. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Thank you. With that, let's go to Charles and Sarah for a brief introduction of where things stand with this right now, and then we will come to everybody for the public hearing.
Great, thank you all so much. This will be incredibly brief. I know that we started a little bit late and we want to dedicate as much time as possible for folks to speak. The intent of this presentation is just to very quickly ground us in where we're at in this plan. I think several of you saw this over on last Wednesday, so I'll be pretty brief. We do a lot of different types of planning in Burlington. We have Plan BTV 2050, which is our citywide comprehensive plan that's going on right now. It's very exciting. I think I encourage everyone to really get involved in that plan, especially now that we're at this process. However, Plan BTV New North End is not as related and not necessarily the exact same as that plan. These neighborhood plans are really vehicles for residents to vision their communities and get a sense of what those communities can look like and grow into in the future. They let us really dive into a lot of the neighborhood level, the things that make neighborhoods unique and different challenges that neighborhoods themselves face. These often result in more neighborhood specific recommendations and goals. Just wanted to quickly touch on the plan timeline. This is online as well, but really highlighting the long process that we have been doing, but also different touch points. I think that some stuff that we're excited about was that we had a great feedback survey with a couple hundred folks responding there back last summer and some exciting engagement. And one thing that is exciting about this is that we're in this third phase of engagement, which is exactly what this looks like. And just like the mayor had said, we have a long, lengthy process ahead. I think and just for clarification, I believe that several of you have heard us talk about the removal of the plans that are the removal of the images and the concepts. The plan or the draft plan that was warned on June 23rd is the one that we're talking about today. So that one still does have the concepts, and the revised version will be brought forth in the coming week or so after this public forum and public hearing, just so that we don't have multiple versions kind of all around and that we're basing everything on one. During this timeline, we created with the community and our awesome pack a great vision and several guiding principles that a lot of these recommendations are grounded in, with 3 different frameworks on how to achieve those that vision. And again, this is really a 20-year vision on how we can achieve this kind of New North End in the future. So this looks like multimodal transportation framework and recommendations, placemaking and urban design, multimodal network across the neighborhood, really addressing a lot of the the need for east-west bike and pedestrian connections, different access points and improved intersections along North Ave, as well as addressing some of the mobility safety concerns along the roadway. A really cool active mobility network that also addresses mobility challenges for those who might not be driving, who also might not be biking and otherwise, really addressing some of the farther reaching portions of the New North End. Public spaces and placemaking being a big part of this, and really addressing how we can bring, how we can support through public spaces a neighborhood identity and other gathering spaces that are looked for in the New North End frequently. This is the part, the urban design focus areas, that I think has raised a lot of attention to the plan, and this framework is very exciting. I definitely want to encourage everyone to check out the rest of the plan. But these focus areas are the ones in pink, and they're identified to be these nodes of activity where a lot of these different frameworks could coincide, and they share different characteristics like capacity, proximity, opportunity, and connectivity. And these were the 5 that were identified. Again, as we mentioned before, we are going to be removing the Ethan Allen Parkway at North Ave focus area and the Star Farm Park focus area, but just wanted to be transparent that these are what were warned on the 23rd. They are intentionally high level. And one thing that this is a unique kind of approach in Burlington to planning, and at this level of detail on these focus areas. We decided to take this approach really to give people something to react to. It's sometimes tough to get a reaction or a kind of get opinions or narrow down ideas based on kind of just ideas and concepts. So having these visuals has really helped us get a sense of what people are interested in seeing, what type of design people are wanting to see. We have 2 different variations of the Ethan Allen Plaza that were modified based on community feedback. So really trying to help us hear from you all on what you like about different ideas, what might not be working, and how we can adjust that in the future. The focus area, just wanted to quickly show that we have, and again, they are levels of detail that are not typical in Burlington's neighborhood plans, of which there are 2 others, the South End and downtown, but focus area number 1 being that North Ave Alliance Church site, that was, and the Ethan Allen Plaza site, and the Plattsburgh Ave, North Ave sites, 2 of these which have already been identified in the 2019 comprehensive plan as areas of growth or change. And we say focus areas, I want to say that these were identified through community conversations and mainly around people wanting to see something like different there. That different can look different across all 5 areas. They aren't intended to all kind of be copy paste and look the same. As you can see, there's a unique vision. There's a unique vision for Plattsburgh Ave that does differ from something like the Plaza. Housing and community spaces on city-owned land, just like the mayor had said earlier, this is something that the city is interested in exploring and trying to look into for a variety of reasons, specifically to address our housing crisis that we're seeing. And this is something that we're exploring across the city. I think if you see the recommendations in the plan, they really emphasize that the next steps are related to a citywide public asset study, and really taking this approach citywide and really diving deeper in follow-up studies and conversations. These 2 focus areas that we are looking at with that public and private ownership being that Ethan Allen Parkway and North Ave and the Star Farm Park. And I want to just kind of, just like I had said, when the community conversations had come up about focus areas and wanting things to look different. The reason that they all came from like different reasons and rationale behind the choices and what we heard from folks. For example, the Ethan Allen Parkway at North Ave really actually stemmed from a desire for that we heard frequently in this process, as well as heard from other past planning efforts about the need to do something about the intersection, explore realignment, and what could we change about that intersection. So that's really kind of what this focus area was grounded in. Star Farm Park being one that we heard a lot of desire for greenway oriented amenities and design, whether it's a rest stop at the bike path or improved community facilities at the park, what that could look like with both coinciding. But again, I want to emphasize these are just testing out ideas and visuals and are intended to spark a conversation and provide feedback for us as we move into the plan. So that concludes that presentation. Promised it was brief and ready to go from there.
Great, thank you. With that, unless there are any questions or comments from the commissioners, we'll move into our public hearing. Anything before you? We're about to go into the public hearing, so. Yes, perfect.
Clarify, I'm not sure if everyone knows what it means to warn a document. Basically, at our last meeting, we had warned this version of the document for this public hearing, meaning that it has to be static. But when we're saying that the visuals are going to be removed, they can't be removed just because we warned that for this public hearing, but they, we anticipate they'll be removed in the next version. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Julia. And we anticipate other changes that might be recommended by the commission. So from the feedback that we hear tonight, the commission will then discuss and deliberate and provide staff with the direction on how to move this forward.
Great. So what we're going to do, we have a lot of people online who want to speak as well, I assume. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go back and forth, try to do like 2 online, 2 here, 2 online, 2 here. And just get a show of hands here. Who wants to speak?
I do have a timer ready for a visual cue for 3 minutes. Thanks.
Yeah, so we're going to give people about 3 minutes. Sarah said there'll be a timer cue. If you can hold it to shorter than that, that would actually be helpful because we want to make sure we hear from everybody. If you hear something that somebody else says that you agree with, reference them and say that you agree. They said, you don't have to repeat it, but just say you're in alignment or however you want to say it with them. I think that just can help with this. And you're also always invited to provide written comments as well. And Sarah to explain how to get those into us. But those are always very helpful also if you have a lot more that you can say.
Just for folks online who would like to speak tonight, if you could please use the raise hand icon on your Zoom screen, we'll get you in the queue.
And so for people in here who want to speak, if you could come on up and sit up here so we can see and hear you a little bit better.
Stay tuned.
Oh, and state your name. So we'll start with you.
Yes, hi, I'm Monica. I want to thank you for my time, and I really appreciate the beautiful planning you're doing. I'm here because I did submit my comments online and email, but I didn't get confirmation. So I'm here to physically give the paperwork to the chair. I am here, I live in Burlington, Vermont, Lakewood Parkway. I submitted a written objection, pre-suite notice and legal memorandum to the planning department yesterday and lead planner earlier. Well, that was yesterday. And I also uploaded the same documents to the Plan BTV public comment portal. I requested that they be, for transparency, these documents be on the website so people in my neighborhood can learn about our covenant. I want to confirm that these documents constitute formal notice of the restrictive covenants governing Lakewood Estates subdivision, and my demand that the bank parcel be removed from all layers and all housing opportunity maps. It is legally impossible for you to build housing on that due to our restrictive covenant. And here I'm serving you pre-suite notice, my formal objection. Also, there is information here that if you were to build there, for your own city website, the impervious sections that you add will create more sewage overflow when it rains, increased lack of green space. So it would actually harm the lake. And we have deeded beach rates right adjacent to that. So with that, I'll let somebody else speak. So here's my pre-suit and my formal objection. And this was sent to your planning leader. Was that Sarah? Was that
Yes, and it's online and on Civic Clerk and was circulated.
Thank
and
you. I
was
have
sent
to
to our-
walk here. So I'm a
Yes.
bit tired.
Sure, and it was sent to our attorney's office
There
and
you
all
are,
of that.
Great,
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
thank you. I'm going to.
Also, there was a petition that will be served on you from the neighborhood.
Thank you. All right. If you'd like to come up and again, with your name.
And the microphone
Elliott.
is over there, so I'm hoping that it can pick up well, so thanks. Thanks.
I like a lot of parts of the plan. I like housing. I love great transportation. But I am just staunchly against the use of public green spaces and parks for private development. The visioning process you've created is functionally a referendum on whether or not you believe that public lands and public parks are available for private and commercial development in Burlington. The decision before this commission is really quite serious. Do the citizens who co-own these generationally stewarded green spaces have the right to say no to this use of our parks and green spaces? Do the children and grandchildren of this city, current and future, have this fundamental right to enjoy the same parks and green spaces that we are currently privileged to enjoy? And I was shocked when I learned about these potential changes coming to communal green spaces over the last few weeks. I felt really shamed at this meeting last time for not being part of this process earlier. So I knocked on 130 doors because we were talking about communication. And I wanted to show you what sufficient communication to a neighborhood looks like. It looks like this. It looks like what happened at the Miller Center. I spoke to dozens and dozens of my neighbors, but you don't have to do that. You can just send us a mailer and we'll tune in. But upon digging deeper, it occurred to me, was that failure perhaps systematic and intentional? And maybe you didn't really want to reach the community members being impacted, because that's how it feels for a lot of us right now. And it's stunning at a time when the environment and importance of green spaces are part of a national discourse that Burlington, of all places, would be talking about parceling our green spaces and our parks for so if we hit financial bumps and we sell our parks now for tax revenue, where does that stop? Parceling our city green spaces is quite possibly the least creative outcome of a city planning process that I can imagine. And your legacy as a generation of stewards will be those who choose to sell it. And one representative on city council recently described the scrubby tree line along Star Farm Road. And I wanted to mention that 2 winters ago, as kids skated and played at the park, that same scrubby tree line drew wildlife photographers from across the region to photograph a tiny screech owl nesting in one of those scrubby trees bordering our ice rink. And what some dismiss as a scrubby tree line is a really important part of our living landscape that makes the park what it is. And so my core question is this: do you, as temporary stewards of this land, believe that today's budget issues justify the permanent sacrifice of our public parks and green spaces?
Let's go to a couple people online.
Yeah, we'll start with Counselor Lipman. I've seen your hand up.
Evan, I think you're muted. Good.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay? I had to give it permission.
Go ahead.
great. I really am here to listen to folks. I won't take the full time here. I just wanted everybody from Ward 7 to know that I'm here and I'm listening and I've been receiving all their emails and trying to respond as best I can. And I want to thank you, Chair, and the Planning Commission for restructuring today's meeting. This is a really, I just really appreciate that. I want to thank the Planning Department for the hard work that they've been doing on this plan, which has so many elements to it. And I appreciate that we're now at this really important phase where we need to gather reactions and listen to feedback and then make the appropriate changes to the plan. And so I'll continue to be available for folks as needed, but just know that I'm here listening to you and I'll be listening the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We have next online.
Go to Sharon.
Yes,
Sorry,
hi.
Sharon.
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Sharon Busher, and I don't live in the New North End, but I care about the New North End, just like I care about all of Burlington. And I went to the meeting in the Miller Center, and I'm not a good estimate, but looked like over 100 people were there. And I want to thank that Julia and Aaron from the Planning Commission were present. And Sarah conducted a difficult meeting. She did a good job, but it was overwhelming. I wasn't surprised at the turnout, but it was overwhelming, I think, for staff to facilitate and hear everybody. I want to speak about, there's so much in the New North End plan that I hope the residents have a chance to comment on. That's really good and really needs their critical eyeball as to which way to go. So I'm hoping that will happen. But I am going to talk specifically about the use of open space for housing. And whether it's in the New North End or whether it's anywhere else in the city, I think when you're talking about increasing density, you're talking about where you want to limit transportation for people going out of the city to get breathability, that our open space is critical. The trees are critical for carbon absorption. Everything is critical in our open spaces. We should be protecting them, not building on them. I'm very concerned about that proposal. It's a proposal I understand, but I also feel that I've been burned as a city councilor where a proposal makes it into a development plan and then people say, well, it was only a proposal, you don't have to worry. But then people refer back to that proposal and say, well, it's there, so it gives us a green light to move forward. I would hope that if you reference this concept, that it's told honestly that this idea hopefully will be not pursued and that other avenues will be pursued to create housing. I'm really concerned about the direction the city is contemplating. And I hope that everyone understands the value and the importance of the open spaces that we have in Burlington. So thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, I'm Marisa. I'm not gonna take long. I just need some clarification.
Your full name, just.
Marisa Mechanic. I've lived in Burlington over 20 years. I've lived in the New North End, the last 10 years. And I'm just a little confused. So I'm wondering if other people are as well. If the parks are being taken out, warned or whatever the phrasing is for that, what, should we move on and not talk about them now? Or like, am I missing
No,
something?
I'm going to talk because they're not just being taken out, but things will probably change. And so understanding what people's vision is, what people are thinking about for will help focus what the next versions of the cigars to look like.
So
the comments are still.
So is it safe to say that
Ethan Allen Park and Star Farm Park are still potential options for housing, but not in the format that you're showing in this presentation, and so that's what you're changing, or can we just take them off the table and, you know, we only have so much time to even discuss this and make progress, and I think a lot of what you're doing and what the mayor said, I really appreciated everything, how you want to hear us, but I felt a little bit like sideswiped by you saying, we're gonna take out these plans. This is what I heard. I'm just telling you what I heard. We're gonna take out Ethan Allen Park and Star Farm Park. Okay, and so I had a sigh of relief and I feel like the whole room kind of went, okay. But then now you're hearing all these comments from these people who are very passionate and prepared. Unlike me, I mean, I'm passionate, but I'm not prepared. And yet you're not saying, no, don't worry, like, we don't have to focus on the parks. Let's focus on these other things that are actually potential options. So I just need to know, are the parks in some way still potential housing options? Yes or no? And I think that'll help clarify for a lot of people whether we need to get this worked up or not.
I can just, I'll just respond to that. I agree with the chair that it's still really important to hear everybody speak. I think we're hearing loud and clear from the folks in this room that there's a strong opposition to building housing in Star Farm Park and Ethan Allen Park. I think the plan does also show in the illustrations that again will be taken out community facilities, other areas of community benefit, new park amenities, for example. So it would be helpful to know if folks support those kinds of things, or if there's opposition generally to building any community facilities like a recreation center or like a splash pad in a park, that sort of thing. I think that's helpful information for us. But again, I just want to reiterate that the drawings that have really caused a lot of concern in the community are being removed. And any reference to Star Farm Park and Ethan Allen Park as focus areas or areas of redevelopment in this plan will be coming out of the draft.
That is to say, recommendations though related to exploring all types of city-owned land is remaining as a strategy. I just want to be transparent, like at present, when we're saying we're removing images, there are recommendations to, at a citywide level, explore all different types of city land, and that recommendation, until we hear from the planning commission, I think there's one of maybe 5 recommendations related to citywide explorations of city-owned land. Until we hear from the commission in that deliberation, those ones are retained in the document itself. So just wanted to be transparent about that.
Okay. Thank you. I don't want to take up much time.
I have a question. Does that definition of city lands, is that just parks? So what's the other definition?
There's various types of parking lots, there's a lot of different lots that are owned by the city that, you know, and one of the reasons for a public asset study is for us to actually understand and this is, I think all cities should do this, understand what types of properties the city owns, identify what deeds are out there, what restrictions due to funding or the procurement or purchasing process of those properties are out there. It's really just an opportunity for us to do due diligence around an inventory, what we own, and then make a very, eventually down the line after extensive public engagement, make a very intentional decision on what types of city-owned land are up for, or what there might be opportunities for. So I hope that provides some clarity.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you guys, send you more messages around that, but thank you for clarifying.
Steven, I'm Ryan Crean. I'm a longtime resident, serve on the Conservation Board and was on the Long-Range Planning Board. And I think to touch on what the previous speaker said, I think there's an issue of trust here. As the mayor walks out the door, I think that kind of speaks to that, in that we shouldn't be here. People don't want to be here. And Plan BTV, which was completed in 2019, made it clear that these areas like Star Farm Park, like Ethan Allen Park, are to be places to conserve, places that, quote, sites that need to be protected from extensive development pressures. That came through this very planning process. And here we are going a complete 180, and it's a complete disregard to the very robust process that was Plan BTV to come back and then just say to lead, because we still see the images of the park ideas. And those, like just tonight, we're still talking about because I don't think people can really feel that we're moving in the right direction. You know, a long time ago, Bernie thought putting condos on the waterfront was a good idea. And I think we all agree, we're glad that he came around and the waterfront park is what it is. But the idea that we would lead with, we would be comparing some of these city parks to places like Sears Lane or surface parking lots, when we haven't even done an assessment of what the city has for assets, that's where we should have housing. And those are places that have been ripe for housing for decades. So I think when the concern here that I hear is that people are like, why are we leading with this idea of these places when we have zoning? Ethan Allen Shopping Center is zoned for neighborhood mixed use for a reason, because that's what the city through this planning process thought where how mixed use housing should be, not in parks next to the bike path or so. The real thing that I'm here to say is I'm calling on you to reject this plan unless all concepts or proposals related to development of parks are removed and any proposals that are in direct conflict with Plan BTV. You all know better than me what those are, but I can say that that is not the only one. The idea that these focal areas were in Plan BTV, they were Ethan Allen Park and Star Farm Park were not focal areas in Plan BTV. I remember that plan and that was not part of it. So in closing, I just think that we can do better. And I think the people here have kind of spoken. And also just to realize these are not just New North End parks or South End parks. These are city parks and they belong to all the city residents and they're open to all visitors. And we have to keep that in mind when we try to create something that goes against the very basis of why they were parks in the first place. Thank you very much.
Let's go to a couple people online and then you.
Gordon?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Sorry.
Yeah. Expiration date.
Gordon, would you be amenable to we're gonna get through one or two more in the room, just a bedtime is approaching,
Sure.
then I'll get to you.
You can get. Yeah, sure. Please.
I'm Gary DeCarlos. I live at 83 Standard Farms Road in Burlington. I'm a former city councilor back in 82 to 88. I looked at the latest draft of BTV, New North End, and 250 back in the spring of 26, and my world turned upside down. There next to the Ethan Allen Park entrance was a yellow dot with the word housing written on it. Oh my, how could that be? I asked. I went to the next ward 47 MPA and sounded the alarm. Then I went to the open house at 1 Main Street to begin my mission to stop any thoughts on developing 1 inch of parkland in the city of Burlington. When I lodged my concern at the open house, the city employee asked, why would you have a problem with that idea? My answer was simple. Parkland is sacrosanct. It needs to be available for all Burlington residents in perpetuity. So let me go back in time a bit. When Ira Allen in 1791 gave land to the state to build the University of Vermont, he had one quid pro quo. The green space in front of the future old mill should in perpetuity rename open space. 235 years later, it remains open space. In 1905, Mayor Van Patten gave the land we call Ethan Allen Park to the city for a park not with housing, just a park. Vice President Fairbanks was at the grand opening of that beautiful park. So I strongly suggest that you have a guiding principle that protects our national resources in the BTV, New North End, and 250 plan. I suggest you have a new guiding principle that our incredible park space be protected from any ideas of development. In fact, I also ask our city council and mayor to support a resolution that protects park space in perpetuity just as one of our founding fathers of Burlington and Vermont did some 235 years ago. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Chase Whiting, and this is Zinnia or Pezza Whiting. We live on at 197 Star Farm Road, so right across the street from the park and the scrubby trees that were referenced. Council, our city council member referred to the scrubby tree line. Those are in our front yard. I would just second much of what was already said, and so I'm not going to really repeat all of that. I'm going to build on one topic a little bit, and then I just want to ask a few questions, and they can be rhetorical for now, but I really would just pose them for everybody's consideration. So let me just begin by saying there is a ton in the plan that is great, and so we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater in that regard. Like, there's good stuff in there. You know, increasing mobility by bikes, that's great. Making public transportation better, that's great. These are things we're going to need in the changing climate, and that's happening now, and it's only going to continue to happen. And I, wrongly thought that Plan Burlington 250 was about climate change, because that's a date the climatologists often look to as when we need to have our ducks in a row. Globally, but also locally, as far as like adaptation goes. And so I was a little surprised then to see that part of the plan was to remove parks, aspects of them, carbon sequestration zones, trees that give shade to the public. So there's a lot that's good in there. I'll just note that on the topic of trust, there wasn't a clear there was an answer, yes or no, or parks gonna be in or out, and we didn't get a super clear answer. I'll also just note that I think some of us feel a lack of trust because we hear that there's not an active plan to pursue development. But that qualifier active does all the work, and it really does create a lot of trust issues. And taking images out of a plan removes the thing that has sparked contention among the voters who elected the folks at the top of this, but it doesn't change fundamentally that there still is a proposal to consider those various spaces. And so I think the fundamentals of the plan there's a lack of trust, just the way that it's being addressed and discussed. So that's what I wanted to build on. Here are the questions. We have heard several times that New North Enders have asked for these sorts of things. How many? Because since this happened, in droves, we've come out to say, don't develop our parks. And so I don't doubt that there are some New North Enders who might want to cut down the trees to put in businesses. But I don't think that that is anywhere near a majority. In fact, I would suggest, just based on the turnout, it's a very few. And certainly compared to the multitude who've come out, a small amount in comparison. So I just ask you all to ponder that. And also, as part of this process, is anyone like part of this process actually from the North End? Do we have representation? Because if not, I know that the deadline for a seat on the planning commission passed in May, but perhaps you consider opening it up again and doing some work to get somebody from the New North End to actually engage, and somebody who's representative of the public will. And so just suggestions. I know some of those things probably are things that could be done or looked into relatively quickly, but want to put them out there so that whatever does get adopted or proposed hopefully does represent the will of the people. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you want to go to the online and then we'll come back. So go online and then come back to do. Thank you.
All right, Gordon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. My name is Gordon Dragoon. I'm a resident of Ward 4, and I was part of the Plan BTV New North End PAC. I am in support of this plan, and in the half dozen public meetings I attended, I thought city staff did a great job. At these meetings, I did hear an outpouring of support. This plan is far more than the pieces that have been discussed,
but I think it gives us a framework for transforming the new North End in a positive way. The main concerns that I've heard have been around selling public land and the transforming of park space to alternative uses, which I'll try to briefly address here. I've heard that people are worried that this plan is going to sell our public land to private individuals. I think that this point is coming from the right place. People read about the absurd things that are happening at a federal level, namely the selling of our national parks to make a quick buck and think this is analogous, but it's not. The plan is not advocating for the selling of public land. It is merely suggesting that public land can be used in multiple ways. This could resemble Singapore's 99-year leases, social housing, or just general responsible development. For example, the city building housing on this land can be used for housing teachers below market rate, like they have done in California. To say this point clearly, this plan can be executed effectively without the selling of land to private entities. On the topic of transforming park space, I think that the vision that has been shared is a positive one. Speaking to the Ethan Allen Parkway transformation in particular, what I saw in the plan was a safer intersection and more usable public space for, to me, little cost. I can accept that the current state of things is the way that some people want things to stay, but for me, I see better bike ped infrastructure, safer intersection for automobiles, a public plaza, and development of housing that can be more democratic than what we see in the current private process. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. We'll go to somebody else online and then.
We'll go to Evan, and just a reminder for those online, if you'd like to speak during public forum, you can use the raise hand feature.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Evan Gould. I'm a resident of the New North End, where I live with my wife and our 3-year-old, or almost 3-year-old, and our second child, which we're expecting in November. I use Star Farm Park extensively. I use Ethan Allen Park extensively, and I understand the concerns of my neighbors. But I've also seen over my 18 years living here, how many young people and families are not able to afford to live in our city. And so I appreciate that the planning department has considered options for using public land to provide permanently affordable housing and to actually bring families back into our neighborhood. One of the reasons I wanted to stay in Burlington and why I've been here for 18 years is the ability for my children to walk to parks, to walk to school or bike to school, to have access to those things. And I think if we look at the demographics of the New North End, we have to make some changes. And I understand maybe this isn't the right one, but we need to densify and bring more people in because our schools have dropped a quarter of their populations in the last 10 years alone. And if we continue that demographic shift, that might mean that people who want these walkable neighborhoods won't have access to schools, won't have access to other things in their immediate vicinity. As you age and can't drive, you might not have access to public transit. And so having these amenities within the New North End and the scope of that vision, and also like having some option of public land throughout the city be affordable housing where we can control the number of like bedrooms so that we can encourage more family unit and have more leverage as citizens who live in this town, I think is a good thing. I like the proposal for Star Farm Park. Like I said, I use that park multiple times a week. I use the playground with my kid. I see people there. I see people using the soccer field. And I understood that those amenities would not be going away, but shifting and providing new amenities. And I think the new amenities were great. And I pictured the playground full with new children. But that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's come back here.
I would like to speak.
Yes.
Okay, so the people going to.
Why don't you go ahead and then.
You do have a list of people who said they wanted to speak over there. You could just go down the list.
It's
true. But if you want, it's there if you want us to speak. There we can help you.
And closer to the microphone, it's probably more. My name is Lori Davison. I live in the New North End, on a village. What concerns me terribly about this plan is that there is no differentiation between publicly owned land and parkland. And clearly from the turnout that you've seen at these meetings, there is a will among people to protect parkland to the point where I think personally that the city should create another zone that's parkland, urban wilderness, and prohibit building and development on that land. Because building and developing on parkland is monetizing our parks. It's basically turning them into a revenue stream. They go from being a park, being something that people want to cherish and care for and use and enjoy, to being something that brings money into the city. The mayor even said as much when she was here during her comments. And when that happens, that becomes a priority. I mean, money talks. That's a little cliche, but it's true. So when these parks have been monetized, they're no longer looked at as an asset to the city. They're looked at as a revenue stream. And I think that no park in the city is even really safe when parks are looked at as revenue streams. The next time there's a budget shortfall, or there's a need, or there's an emergency, we look at the next park that could be surrendered to it. Building on publicly owned land is a positive, constructive thing. That's a good thing. That's adding to the city. Building on a park or parkland or sacrificing the urban wilderness is a negative. It's taking something away. It's destroying an asset that the city has that can never be gotten back. The Ethan Allen Park is 125 years old, and that's old growth forest. And there was a bear in it this spring, and habitat for animals like that is disappearing at a rapid rate. And to think of putting housing and making money off of it is frightening to me, because I think that every park in the city will eventually fall to the almighty dollar.
Well, that's, I'm gonna try to talk really quickly. First of all, thanks to Sarah. She did an excellent job with a tough crowd. Sherwood Smith, Pleasant Avenue, New North End. Thanks to Sarah, she did a wonderful job with a tough crowd. And so just appreciation for that. I think that the housing needs are real. I think things people have said are true. You're between a rock and a hard place. There's a need for space. I'm not clear how the money to pay for this is coming from, and there's a history of things not going as they were stated. I want to thank everybody who worked on creating a plan. I think having a plan is 150% better than not having a plan. I do not recommend you take the diagrams off. If they're changed, then change them and leave them on, because then people actually have a chance to see what the plans are rather than looking at words on paper. I'm utterly unclear who wrote the plan, where they got the data from. It was clear from the meeting at the Miller Center, that they used words like underutilization for the space with no data to support it. It's unclear how they've actually measured the use of any of the spaces you're talking about changing, green or otherwise. I don't see any estimates of costs to deal with sewage runoff, drainage runoff, cost for increased water, lighting, construction. So just a lot of questions about data, especially page 18. There's no data listed on page 18. Page 31, there's no comments about how wastewater is going to be handled, what changes in the water supply. Page 32, there are two parts that say no study was done. Only the first three mention studies. On page 133, you talk about stakeholder data, but there's no numbers, no ends for any of the data that you've presented. It was already mentioned on page 135, what are city land versus parklands? I'm concerned about the loss of the playfield on 181 because of the number of games and sports that happen on Star Farm. It's clear that there is an intentional plan to put in housing. I'm not clear how this housing would change tax rates and how that's going to be funded. I applaud the visions for improved transportation, for improved access, for improving the availability of biking and walking paths. I'm wondering about traffic. If you put all that housing in, there's already congestion at the corner of Star Farm Road and North Avenue. And putting a right turn lane with kids trying to get back and forth from school is not what I think is a good solution. I'm not clear what the difference is between remove and revise, but that's up to you all. If you put in these facilities like the community center, how are you going to afford staffing to support those facilities, given the already budget problems I see for the city? And I'm wondering why some of the land on the Intervale was listed as not available. I'm not clear what that, about exactly what that parcel involves. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more online?
I don't see any online. Just a reminder, if you'd like to, if you're online and would like to speak. Counselor, do we have a question?
Just one quick question. I looked at the sheet on comments and my comments were posted and it says this email was from someone outside the city of Burlington.
Oh, it's our organization. It was sent to, it's our, it flags our emails, like outside the city of Burlington means outside of the burlingtonvt.gov email system that we have.
Thank you.
So let's go to Sarah and then we'll come back.
Counselor Carpenter, you're able to speak.
Okay, hi, thanks. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm here. I've been at a lot of these meetings, certainly available for more discussion. I just want to remind people how much there is in the plan, and I really congratulate the staff in working on it. And so we've got to refocus some of what has been presented. I do believe we need more families in the new North End, and we've got to figure out how we can accommodate that growth, which I think will come. We've lost a lot of children in our school system, and that's creating problems for us, particularly our tax rate, which depends on having children in the system. So those are all goals I think we need to look at. I am not saying we need to build on parkland, but I am looking forward to the public asset study because we really need to understand what we own. And I don't think we do entirely. There may be peripheral lands related to the schools that could be available. I think there are some prime places for private developers to work, and we need to facilitate that and have a plan that accommodates the kind of growth we want in places like the shopping center, the church lands. There are, in fact, proposals to build on Star Farm by the folks that own the nursing home. So we need to make sure our plan accommodates all of that without treading and reducing any of the valuable, wonderful assets that we do have. And so I just want to assure folks that I will accommodate all that. Part of this plan, integral has to be our open space plan, and we will refer back to that as we kind of continue to express this vision as we grow and need to grow in the new North End. So thank you. Thank everybody for coming. And like I said, I'm available for comment offline and look forward to the revisions that staff will bring us.
Thank you. Let's come back into the room. This is land.
My name is Brooks Elder of Star Farm Road. And I actually read the plan, almost every word of it. What I find it did well is it listed the prior plans that came before it. And there's a bunch of them. There's 10 listed in here of prior plans that were cited. What's concerning is that are two notably missing. And one is actually titled Plan BTV, and it's not even mentioned in here, which is the Open Space Protection Plan. So it strikes me as very contradictory that you would have a plan BTV and then an open space protection plan under Plan BTV that is not cited in here.
It is on, in the first pages, I'm happy to point it out, I just wanted to provide that clarification.
A separate section from the prior plan is listed.
It shouldn't be, I know that.
I'm not gonna use my 3 minutes
Perfect, happy to
to
reallocate.
argue that, but that was from my reading.
Sure,
Check it again.
sure.
And the other thing that's missing is a report that was done for Burlington, the Star Farm Forest Assessment in 2016. And in that, it lists the land on the east side of Star Farm Park as a quote, potential high priority conservation target for acquisition by the Conservation Legacy Program. And to continue quoting that assessment, this parcel, if acquired, would be managed as an urban wild. So my concern is we had the opportunity to turn this resource, this treasured resource, into an urban wild, rife with RTE, 9 of them listed in the plan, and education opportunities and every other benefit that green space brings. And instead, we looked at it as a housing building opportunity. That's a concern. One other item that's not mentioned in here is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which as planners, you probably know, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but gives federal funds to parks so that we can build out fields and improve playgrounds with federal funds. Now, if you then turn that land and convert it into something other than park space, such as housing or commercial development, you have a huge scrutiny from federal and state commissions who will put us through the ringer on that. And there's strict legal safeguards to prevent us from doing that. So it's concerning that that wasn't looked at in here, and we got to the point where we're at without referencing the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So I have some real concerns that we're 19 months into this planning process and we're still going back to the planning, like going back to the drawing board. So those are my concerns. I mimic everything that everybody else has said in support of not building on the parks, and I'll leave it at that.
Hi, my name is Alice Rudd. I live in 191 Star Farm Road. I do want to thank Sarah. We have been in constant contact since the Miller Center meeting. She did a great job with a pretty contentious group. And I want to just harken back to what Chase said regarding trust, that this vision has really kind of fallen like a lead balloon on the new North End. And a couple of things, we talked about the plan, the vision, but right here on the cover, it says adopted XX June 2026. So when you say this, these are visions and discussions, but we see something in print that is assuming the close, it literally sets us off as not trusting the government that we are. So my proposal is going to be another bold vision that for the new North End plan, you absolutely scrap it and start anew. I think you've lost so much all the buy-in from your stakeholders here that we don't trust you. Saying we're going to take these out of the plan, nobody believes you. And that's sad. When we become cynical on our government, we have lost our footing and you all have lost your footing. So I want to say, if you really want to really earn our trust back, the new North End and the stakeholders, just scrap the new North End draft. There's parts of the big plan. Yes, we all agree. Sears Lane, yes. Plan B TV, yes. But the new North End draft should be scrapped and start anew. And I'm just going to bring up a couple of things to think about. Yes, Sarah, I know you're anticipating my email tomorrow, but one of the things is if this plan doesn't work, if the new North End draft doesn't work, all you've done is increase noise, traffic, air pollution, if none of the assumptions work. So that is something the vision of the city we do not adhere to. Number two, spillover parking. In the new North End draft, disaster. You have no resource for spillover parking. We already have parking issues. When the Birchwood has their nurses come to visit, they pile into Gray Meadow, a quiet neighborhood. It's just lined with cars, nothing anticipated. So spillover parking, huge friction with the neighborhood. Already we're on pins and needles about it. Increasing crowding and conflicts on the Greenway, aka the bike path. This proposal is saying that you want to turn the Greenway into a freeway. You want to have 24/7 lighting on it. You want to use it as a main thoroughfare. It's a recreational bike path. It is not a highway. And it shouldn't be. My kids actually who bike to school, bikes down the spot on the dock to work, they take the bike lanes on North Avenue. That was a huge investment. I supported bike lanes on North Avenue. I was probably one of the dissenting voices of the crowd. They like it because there's plenty of light. There's cars that can see them. They can get services. If there's an accident, the police or an ambulance can show right up. You're saying make the Greenway a highway. Lastly, and I know I'm running out of time, loss of habitat. We've heard a lot about that. Impervious surfaces, ground that runoff, 24/7 lighting, absolutely contradictory to our dark skies projects. And paths, increasing foot traffic is gonna be, it's gonna hurt important habitat. So if you really want to gain the trust of the New North End residents, you start new. You say, you know what, we're not revising, we're taking it from the top, we're gonna do a whole nother year of community engagement and let the people that have not known about this speak and really give positive impact so we can all embrace the vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Colby Korean and I'm a Burlington resident. I would just like to start by saying that I'm deeply disheartened and in fact angry that this city administration would threaten Burlington residents with the development of their parks and green space. And I use the word threaten very deliberately because the loss of parks and green space is a threat. It is a threat to our physical health. It's a threat to our emotional well-being. And it is a threat to our sense of stability and community, which are both we're losing both of those feelings very quickly right now. I feel like any one of us can look around the city of Burlington and recognize that it's growing. Burlington is growing and Burlington will continue to grow. We can also all look around and see that the climate is changing. Climate is changing and it will continue to change. And one of the only things that can address both of these massive changes in our lives are parks and green space. They address both of these major things. And I would just have one more thing to say, which is I feel really bad that this city administration has put the entire burden of defending these parks on New North End residents. I live in the old North End, and I just want to say to my New North End neighbors, there are people all over this city that love and value these New North End gems. And you do not feel like you have to be alone in defending them and protecting them. We will be there with you to protect them till the end. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a few comments. My name is Matt Roby.
If you would mind, just for the microphone.
Can you restate your name?
My name is Matt Roby. I am a New North End resident. I am also a planner, and I think there's aspects of this plan that are great. I also know that the meeting last week was not an easy one and a big onslaught of emotion. One of the things that I think was a process challenge for this plan was that it really there was no indication in the early process steps that developing housing on parkland was part of where it was going. And even when some of the early nodes of priority sites selected for urban design concepts came up, that really didn't seem to be on the radar, and it feels like those pieces got added at the end of the plan late in the game, and I think that's where a lot of trust was lost. And I don't know about scrapping the whole plan. I really like a lot of the concepts for Ethan Allen Plaza. I support a lot of the evaluation of like how to make North Avenue a more functional corridor.
And I support there being more density. I also think that like New North End is a great place for families. I moved here because I had a small family and I could afford to live in the New North End. And I haven't lived here that long, and I'm glad to be here. And so I think there is a lot of rhetoric that we need more families in the New North End. There are a lot of families. And so I just wanted to say that. The other point that I think I wanted to make kind of clear is if we're talking about what kind of amenities we want to keep in Star Farm Park or in Ethan Allen Park, why not have a park master plan like we have for Lynn Park? If we're sort of talking about what amenities make sense in specific parks as part of a neighborhood plan, that's one thing, but I know that the city has in the past done full scale park planning and has the ability to sort of think more comprehensively about each park and the facilities it serves and what it really needs. And I think if that's what we want to do with these parks, then we should have a comprehensive park planning process for it, rather than sort of adding a couple of ideas and then moving in a direction. I don't think that doesn't quite feel as in line with the process goals as I wanted to. I do applaud the city for taking this on, and I think this next step in the implementation phase, which I like totally support, like looking at all the city's assets to understand what the carrying capacity of them are, I would recommend removing city parkland from having the potential for redevelopment while still inventorying those assets and understanding what they're contributing. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Neville Morris. I live downtown. My wife was raised in the North End. She has 3 generations of family that live there. We love Burlington. I support preserving our parks, but that's not what I'm coming up here to comment about. I heard some opposition about bike safe and pedestrian infrastructure at the previous meeting at the Miller Center. So I don't know how popular that opinion is. I just wanted to provide a voice of advocacy for that. We love that we can bike everywhere in Burlington year round. And as we look to raise a family, we intend to stay in Burlington, and we don't look at the New North End because it is not very bike friendly. And not as bike friendly as it could be, as the plan points out. That's all I'm pointing out here. I support changes made for bicycle and pedestrian friendly infrastructure. When those things are made, more people bike and more people walk. And then it becomes even safer when more people are seen doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Dan Elliott. I also live on Star Farm Road and have for almost 20 years. I want to pull together a couple of thoughts and analogies and leave with an ask, I think. Mr. Montrell, I heard you refer to this process here as building a foundation for what the vision could be. And I heard the mayor say similar things. We're looking at a vision of how we look to make these plans for the future. And also on the beginning, the PowerPoint at the beginning, talking about some of the key essential things that this group has put together in conversation with some of the citizens of the city as well. And one of those keystones is preservation and of sustainable green spaces. And also look back to maybe a decade ago, I don't quite remember the date, but penny for parks was a somewhat controversial issue to raise taxes in order to spend more money on our parkland. And the citizens voted in favor of that, said, yes, I'll pay more money to enhance our parks, to preserve our parks. And so I would like to reflect what many voices have said here, which is that the citizens of the city think that the green spaces are very valuable as green spaces. And I think that that should be a keystone of the planning to say, these spaces need to be held onto as they have been for literally hundreds of years by all of our predecessors. They're essential. They're part of what makes the city valuable. And I think you're hearing a lot of voices saying, don't touch that part, please. And instead of saying, hey, we're taking this off the plan for now, it's not in the plan right now, we're not talking about it. I would love for there to be a concrete statement. These places will be preserved and saved, and we're gonna look for ways to work around them, to enhance them. And that's foundational. That's a keystone to the foundation that you're putting in place, looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.
If anyone else wants to speak? Very rational.
Hi, Seth Sherman from Liquid Estates. I'm really fascinated by the process in terms of when you do planning, you look at the entire county holistically, because we seem to be kind of in a vacuum a little bit. We're talking about Burlington, but when I look at the city, I can't help but look at what's happening in South Burlington and all the way up to Williston and everything. And maybe some of these issues will organically resolve themselves with all this new housing that's being built. I mean, I've really never seen development in an area like this. I've lived in a number of places that's gone so fast and so far in terms of the county. And I don't know if there are the incomes or the jobs in the area. And so are we going too fast headlong to try to solve something without kind of taking a bigger picture, waiting for data to come in? What's going to happen with all of these developments? Are they all going to fill up? Are they filled up already? I have no idea, but as they fill up, it's possible that many older neighborhoods and homes will open up, and things could start to resolve themselves that way. So that's the only point I want to make. It and in one word, moratorium on building is what I really feel should happen at this point. There's been a lot of building going on. I saw this happen in Virginia Beach in the 80s. It went from a sleepy resort town to a megalopolis. I know that in places like the Outer Banks and Cape Cod, they just say, no, we can't do it. We're an environmentally sensitive place. We can't just solve all these problems ourselves. We have to look at the entire county and maybe be more holistic. And maybe the best thing is to put things on ice and let data come in and analyze it before making these type of plans. So thank you. Thank you.
Good, how you doing? Erhard, good to see you. So I'm Dave Hartnett. I wasn't gonna speak until I heard Attorney for Parks. And just a quick history there. I was on the council, I was chair of the Parks Commission at the time. City was going through some tough financial times, and the Parks Commission, along John Ewing, myself, Carolyn Hansen, and others, were really concerned about our parks falling apart. And so we went to the current administration at that time, which was the KISS administration, and we asked him if he would consider, putting a ballot question on the item, dedicated penny for parks. All money would be dedicated to park projects. He said he wasn't interested in doing that. So we, in respect to the mayor and stuff, we went around him a little bit, went to the city council, and we said, would you guys be willing to put this resolution forward to get it on the ballot? They said they would. It passed by about 85% of the people in Burlington said, yes, we want to take care of our parks. That program is in existence now. It's an amazing program and it does great things, right? And I think we're at that critical junction now. And I was at the Miller Center last week, and it gave an opportunity for a whole bunch of other negative conversation to happen about bike lanes and bike turns and all this other stuff, right? That doesn't need to be brought up anymore, right? Bike safety is critical in our city, and we want that, and that's happening in the new North End, and that's beyond us now. And that was another tough time out in the New North End, right? We don't need to have that litigated again, right? And so I would urge this BTV and the city and the administration to answer this woman's question right here that she asked earlier. Do we have to worry or do we not have to worry about housing in our parks? I think it would be really good for you guys to say, guess what? We're gonna move forward, but you'll never have to worry about building any homes in our parks. And it's
Anyone else? I don't see anyone. So great. Thank you to everybody who came to speak tonight, both here and online. And with that, we will close this public hearing for today and bring it back to the commission on where we go forward. Any comments, questions from the commission? Good.
Maybe could you just talk about like what this discussion is right now and in the future, you know, forums, just well,
yes.
We're responding to public forum right now.
So,
and then
so now, yes, so. The draft plans have been warned for the public hearing and. Both today and last week and previously, there've been a lot of comments. And so part of our job now is to take those comments and I'll say broadly, decide whether we want to incorporate any of those comments. I believe the answer to that is yes. So, so the question is how we go about now really directing and, you know, having Sarah and Charles make the adjustments. They've already talked about some of the adjustments they're going to make, but if there are other adjustments to the plan that they haven't mentioned, that we've heard, that we want to start having them move towards, and there'll be more opportunity for this as well. This isn't just necessarily a one time and we're done. They'll go back, do something, and it comes back to us. I'm not sure exactly what all the process will be because it's a little bit different now than I think what the idea was, but there's going to be a fuller process.
I think, and just in terms of next steps, I think what staff is looking for is maybe some more, you know, we already know that we want to remove the images. And I just, after hearing and reading comments, just looking for any additional changes to the plan that we can then go on and over the next month or two, make those revisions. I know that we also have other public engagement commitments that we need to make following that we've made that we need to execute following this public hearing, including another community engagement meeting about this. And we've gotten a lot of questions that we need to kind of put together in FAQ. So during that time, we also want to be making revisions from the Planning Commission's recommendations. So, and then eventually after all that's done, I'm anticipating a month and a half or so for staff to make those changes and execute that engagement. We'll bring a new draft to the Planning Commission for review. And then after that, the Planning Commission could warn another public hearing based on the revised version of that draft.
So, one question, if we're on the email list, will we be notified when that revised version is released? Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank you.
well, just to thank you for that background. And thanks everybody for speaking. It's really great to hear everyone's input on this and appreciate all the thought that everyone put into their comments. I think, you know, it's obviously really clear that the visuals, but also the recommendations related to developing housing in parks or, you know, considering the possibility of developing housing in parks has had a lot of negative reaction. And one point that stuck out to me from the public forum this evening was the fact that it's specific to the New North End, and you know, this plan is sort of a test case for that opportunity that we're considering citywide. And I think, you know, it makes sense when there is this every 10 to 15 year or however long the interval is of a planning process for the New North End to make sure that we do address some of those sites that could be possibilities. So it makes sense why this was something that was considered for this plan. But I think this is something that is more appropriate for the city asset study to take up. And Sarah did mention it last week, but there is also a different study that's affiliated with the city asset study that is going to be looking at the ecosystem services benefits of parks and open spaces in Burlington. And so that information and what we've learned from this process, I think is good to consider in that city asset study. And so I think it makes the most sense to me to take out the city-owned land portion of the plan from the New North End plan at this point. And, I noted some of the urban design principles that are related to that. There are two to three that could stay because they are not specifically related to that. That was number 4 and number 7. And then I did have a question about urban design principle 1 and, whether that should appear in the city asset study or it should appear in the economic development plan. Basically, this conversation, I think, could and should continue about the possibility of developing on city-owned land. But I appreciate everybody's concern about, wanting to get a category answer, whether housing is being considered for parks in general and specifically these parks, and we have not given that answer. And I feel like, we need to do the city asset study and the ecosystem services assessment to be able to give that answer more fully. And I'm curious if others agree with that.
Anyone else? Any other?
So I'll just say it is clear that we need more housing. And I do, in spite of all of the controversy it's caused, I think it is incumbent upon us to look at every possible resource. Should that include parks? I really don't think so. I live across the street from a park. If somebody were to propose housing on a park across the street, I'd be really upset. And I hear what the New North End folks are saying. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And in terms of data, it's quite clear from state data and that's been broken down at the regional level that we need to create literally thousands of units of housing within the city of Burlington. And we need to make room for families, as many folks have said. This is a statewide problem. We have fewer and fewer students in our schools. We can't support our schools because we don't have enough families with children. So I just want to make sure that folks in the neighborhood appreciate the rock and the hard place that we are in terms of trying to balance all the needs of the city. And it is a balancing act. I agree with taking out, we definitely need a study on city-owned land and how some of that can be used for housing. I agree with that. But I think that we should take parks off the table. I really do. The only way I would say to keep some of that on the table would be in the reconfig. So there was a proposal, gets to some of the visuals. There was a proposal to reconfigure the Ethan Allen Parkway intersection to make it safer. And I think that that's from a transportation standpoint, that is an important thing to look at. Whether or not that provides some opportunities for some land that is currently a portion of Ethan Allen Park to be used in other ways. I'm gonna reserve judgment on that, but to me, what's driving that more is the safety of that intersection and the need to change that intersection. So I would not take that kind of sector study out of it just yet.
Any other?
I have to agree with Earhart about the Ethan Allen Parkway intersection with North Avenue, that one of the drivers for looking at was the safety of that intersection. And is there a way to bend that intersection to make it a 90-degree angle, make it a T? And that is in part dependent on privately owned land. The former gas station is now an auto repair business, and other businesses just north of there, including Walgreens. So we don't know what's going to happen to those properties, but the idea is this is something that we could do in the future that would make it a safer, better intersection.
Oh, well, I think just in general, thank you guys all for coming and sharing your thoughts on the plan. We know how hard it is to get out of your regular life to come to a meeting and only be able to talk for 3 minutes. I was there last week as well. And I think, yeah, it's so clear that development in parks in the new North End, and as many of you brought up across the city, is a non-starter. And so that's super clear. So I am with my folks here who agree that we should pull back on that. But I guess for me, the part that of this process, and I think I've talked about this a little bit in previous meetings, is just that, from where I sit on the planning commission, and I have a little bit of a background in planning, is that hearing Charles and Sarah having talked about the plan prior to when it kicked off, about all of, and again, I know I'm talking to a room of people who do not feel like they have been communicated to, but from my perspective, I went to 2 events, one at the school that IA was at, St. Mark's, and then I went to the Schiffoletti celebration last summer, or last spring, and there's tons of engaged people. So I think as I think about what the next steps are for the team in the city, is how to get more of you there. And one of your guys' neighbors said, well, put it with our tax bill at the meeting, which is so funny because we got them last week. And that's only a percentage of the people who live in the city. But anyway, I just think thinking more about public participation and how to get more of you guys along earlier in the process. And I'm the planning commission representative on Plan BTV 2050. And so as I'm thinking about that, it's come up a few times tonight, and how we can make sure we have all sorts of folks, not just the people that tend to attend these sorts of meetings. And it was just kind of a bummer to hear about the distrust with the city, because, I think of our community as one where we are transparent to a fault and we are inclusive. And so to hear many of you talk about that, I was like, okay, wow, you guys are having a big experience about this. So thank you for coming.
Thanks. So when this process started, as with other processes like this, we all know, we're facing a pretty significant housing crisis. And what we asked planning staff to do was basically be creative, leave no stone unturned, look at everything at every opportunity. And then it gets evaluated. But unless you present the opportunities, it will never get evaluated. And the development in the parks, the housing development in parks, is one of the things that came up during that whole process. And it was looked at, and it was not certain where it would go, but it was an idea. And through this process, I think it is pretty clear that that's a non-starter. But I think it's really valuable, honestly, to look at things like that, to understand where the community is, because we do hear different things from different members of the community just in discussions. And you never know where it will really land sometimes until we have an engagement like what's been happening. As hard as this is, and I know how difficult this is. There are a lot of ideas over the years that come up because we ask people to be creative, and they're creative, and people look at it and say, actually, this is a good idea. A lot of the neighborhood code came out of that. This doesn't work. The housing in the parks, especially right now, doesn't work. But I really appreciate having had the opportunity to look at it. Because I think now we have a clear idea of where the community is, not just in the New North End. And sorry that you were sort of like starting point on it, but as we're moving in towards Plan BTV 2050, this is really good information to know. And sort of similar things happened with the South End plan. And what I'm finding really telling is when we do the citywide plans, we get one level of information, but when we do like a real neighborhood plan, like the South End plan, like the New North End plan, people drill down into that a lot more. And I'm not sure if everybody remembers, but with the South End plan, we got, I'll say, well past this process for the original version of it. And then it got pulled back because there was a lot of community opposition, and it took a little while, and a much better plan came out. Because we got, and also because, again, we had asked staff to look at a variety of things, and they came to us, and some of it got incorporated and some of it didn't. But without that creativity, you know, for the South End plan, I don't think it would have worked that well. And I think the same thing for this plan, and the same thing for our larger one that we're working on. So it's unpleasant as it probably was to have to go through all of this. It was a really valuable exercise to know where the community is and to give us better direction to move forward. So all your work in looking through the plan was really valuable, and your work in presenting the concepts were really valuable in the process as well. But at this stage,
Yeah, can I just
sure.
say a few words? Thank you, Andy, and thanks to all the commissioners for your brief remarks tonight. Sorry the other commissioners couldn't be here, and I do really want to thank you all for coming tonight. I couldn't be at last week's meeting. I had a family emergency to attend to all last week. I just want to say that honestly, when we start any of our planning work, we do create an engagement plan. We did that with this effort, and the goal of that is to reach as many people as we can. The state specifically directs us to reach out and engage with communities and residents who typically haven't been engaged in planning processes. And so we did that, and we crafted an engagement plan that we thought would bring in a diverse group of people. And clearly we never are able to capture everybody in a community, and deeply sorry for that. It's really tough to make that happen. Believe it or not, in a community of Burlington's size, a statistically valid survey is getting 400 responses. And I'm not saying that, you know, our engagement effort was meant to be representative of the whole New North End. I'm just saying that it's really hard to try and get in touch with everybody. And the purpose of that engagement is to have conversations at all stages. When we started this work, there were no drawings, there were questions about, you know, what do you love about living in the New North End? What do you wish there were more of in the New North End? What concerns you? What are your hopes for the New North End? And that sort of helped us understand what we felt were some of the needs and desires of the community. And then it was our job to translate that feedback based on practices that have been used elsewhere, that our colleagues have used elsewhere, that have been used elsewhere in Burlington. And clearly, again, when we brought those translations back, we still weren't able to reach everybody. And I'm really sorry that we couldn't have the conversations with you all during those early phases. Clearly, I think we could have headed a lot of this off, and a lot of these concepts that have created a lot of concern from you all and your neighbors, likely would have remained left on the floor of the drawing room. And I do just hope that you take one thing from this meeting, that we really do try and speak to as many folks as we can in all of these planning efforts. And based on what, you know, the planning commission has heard tonight and what we as staff have heard tonight, you know, my recommendation as planning director, you know, will be to the administration to remove parks from the, you know, city asset study right now. I do think that, you know, I will say that, you know, it's my job as planning director. There's conflicting responsibilities that I have. One of those is to collect feedback from residents. This is a democracy, and to bring that feedback to the administration. The other is to, you know, use best practices from elsewhere, strategies that have been used elsewhere that holistically address the poly crises in which we are engaged in this world right now. And there are communities who have done what I believe to be our really incredible housing projects in community open spaces that have benefited those areas ecologically, that have benefited those areas from a well-being and social value perspective, and benefited those places from an affordability perspective. But that responsibility as the planning director does not trump the really fundamental responsibility that I have to bring community feedback to the administration and make recommendations on that. And while I believe that there can be, because I've seen them really, like I said, incredible projects happening in all sorts of public lands around the country and around the world. It's most important here that you all have, you know, have had the opportunity to tell us what you think right now. Again, we would have, we hoped, we would have loved to have these conversations earlier with you, but again, that's what I'll be recommending to the administration, and again, it's on the planning commission's feedback tonight. I'll just end with that, and I'll also just say that, you know, if anybody wants to have a conversation about like how in the world could we have ever thought about this, like I'd be happy to do that and just walk through some of these projects. You know, I spoke to, for example, a planning director halfway across the world who managed a project like this and described a difficult process there. And would love to share just some of that feedback, but I really appreciate you bringing your honest concerns to us. Again, I wish these conversations could have happened earlier. I know you all care deeply about your community. We do as well. The planning staff, 2/3 of us do live in the North End, and we care deeply about our own private lives and our own neighborhoods. And so I'll just conclude with that. And again, you've got our email addresses and phone numbers, and please reach out if you'd like to talk.
Sorry, when we come back to this, I do have a few clarifying questions. I have a few clarifying questions for the commission, just to get a clear understanding of direction and what sections or aspects or recommendations we're removing. When we're ready for that.
We might be ready for it.
Great. I heard that there's interest in removing recommendations related to the parks, and I want to just understand, you know, there is the section of, starting on page 165, a vision for housing and community spaces on city-owned land, and there are accompanying strategies related to those, one of which is a public asset study, and those are the urban design recommendations. Is the recommendation and desire of the planning commission to remove this section entirely related to the city-owned land piece, and accompanying recommendations, or are there specific recommendations that should be retained?
Can you pull it up, or is that hard?
And if
I think,
I'm not sure, I'm not gonna be able to give you that
Yeah, okay.
granular level of
I think the
input.
question is to what extent
I think,
removal is.
let me try and then
Sure.
tell me if you have to nuance to. I think what we're asking is that the portion that we'd be looking at it to do in the city parks be taken out, but other city land is still open for exploration. Is that?
What page?
But are you, I think what Sarah's kind of asking is it's the focus area, removing the focus areas, but there's other aspects that where there was suggested development.
So I think we should focus on the implementation framework on page 216. That's where this is most concisely documented.
Let me ask, does this conversation have to conclude tonight, or could we come back?
It is important. I think the question that Sarah is asking is, I think I heard Julia say this, to remove urban design 1 recommendation, which is complete a public asset study that includes public engagement to identify the development feasibility of each city asset and a procurement strategy that retains the city's design and programmatic control of its property. That one does not mention parks. The only urban design recommendation that mentions parks is UD3 here, which is
2 as well. Public land, I don't know.
Thoroughly explore the use of public land for housing in the comprehensive plan BTB 2050. So 3 is the one that mentions parks, and it says that in the event that public open space is identified and pursued as a site for housing and community development, the city should seek to replace a commensurate amount of acreage and or program elsewhere in the city in line with the plan BTB 2050 BPRW element. So that's the only one that specifically mentions parks.
And
there is a section of the plan earlier that does talk in more detail about parks and how some of these concepts would have created funding opportunities for park amenities. And I think any mention of parks development, we know is going to be removed.
And is it the desire from the plan, for example, for UD2, say thoroughly explore the use of public land, excluding parks, or is that?
Yes, yeah. We want to exclude.
Okay, I just want to be.
Can't read any of that. Where is that?
It's on page 216 on the plan draft that's on the one.
That's different for parks and green spaces, because parks are parks, and then there's like green space, and then like the tree belts they call it along Star Farm Road, that's a green space, it's not a park.
Well, that is part of the park, actually.
Well, it does go on the Flynn School.
Yeah, there's about 100 foot, technically part of the park.
I think it's with the conservation and open spaces plan, it's like not just parks, it's other.
Yeah, maybe we could say,
Green space.
I think parks and, we can, let's just say conserved open spaces for now, which is shorthand for any property that is permanently conserved through, some sort of conservation.
Or could be. Unless I'm worried, like there's these little pockets of green space that aren't technically the park, but like the trails behind Star Farm Park and the lower fields.
So those are private property. Yeah, a lot of that is private property.
The green space is along like Letty.
That's all part of Letty Park.
So that's all, as long as it's the park is green space.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get caught.
Yeah.
I like the addition of conserved to open space because it gives more of a definition. Like,
Yeah.
We have an open space plan that has a specific meaning, but to the casual reader, the open space could be a part of it.
You have something.
I just had a question about the narrative about the city owned land piece and whether that I don't know that this is the right plan for that information, like me, if that, you know, taking parks out of it, the discussion of building on city-owned land, maybe, is that something that could go into the economic development plan?
I don't think it would be an economic development issue only. I mean, I see housing as a holistic issue that fulfills all of the priorities of the community, so I wouldn't put it in the economic development.
I guess I'm just like concern is about it being specific to the New North End as opposed to, you know, something that is
2050.
looked at citywide.
This just said, are you talking about UD two?
No.
Why?
We're talking about
There's
talking about the
there's
section that starts on page 165 that says a vision for housing and community spaces on city-owned land. And it dives into specific benefits of utilizing city-owned land generally, as well as local precedents, including 68 Sears Lane Memorial Block, as well as national precedents and international precedents. It also then is followed on, starting on page 174, Ethan Allen Parkway. It provides the.
Yeah, if I could suggest, I don't think we could edit it sitting here, but I think the gist of it is that to the extent that that is moving towards developing housing in our city parks, those concepts should probably be removed. There might be other concepts that remain relevant on city land, but the extent that it's within.
I think what I'm hearing Julia ask or recommend is that this section that I was describing, that includes the local precedents, et cetera, be potentially better suited for Plan VTV 2050.
I'm
Yeah.
really not following this. Sorry, it's late. You're asking granular comments on something that I just don't feel.
Sure, I think my intent is just to get a sense for when we come back.
right there. Earhart, this is just a question of removing the entirety of the section that begins on page 165 and related urban design recommendations on 216. Removing those in portions that relate to city-owned land generally, or just any mention of parks, land, or conserved open spaces. There are many types of public lands in the city.
I think just for me, it's just removing parks. I think it's fine to talk about public lands and looking at the assets overall.
At this stage, what I would suggest is going through that, taking the comments we have, and then coming back with us with your recommendations over whether it should be in or not should be in for the extra parts. But I think we need the guidance from them because they need to go through, you need to go through and see if it fits within this or if it fits better within like Plan 2050. But the guidance that we could give you clearly tonight, I think, is that there shouldn't be the development in the city of housing in the city parks.
Okay.
And then take a look at the whole and see what flows from that, what changes need to flow from that. But I think we really look to you, as you go through it, to come back with recommendations of how to achieve that. That makes sense to everybody.
Does that work for you guys? Sure.
Is that specific enough? We can go on for now.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else on this for now?
Just want to note that we will also be removing the image of the bank property that the Wayland, I think his name, spoke about early on. I think she was in
Lakewood Estates.
Yeah, the Lakewood Estates property along North Athens.
Thank you. All right. So thank you to everybody. We will close item 5. I'm sure there will be a lot more coming in the future. And really appreciate all the comments. So we're going to backtrack to items 2, 3, 4, and then move on to the end. 2 is the chair's report. don't have anything else to report tonight, so item 3 is the director's report.
Like the meeting discussion.
I'll talk to that, but
I don't have any.
item 4 is minutes and communications. Is there
There were no minutes attached, but I'm very excited to share that CETO has, our new admin support from CETO has started today. And I trained Morgan, and I will be asking the commission that in future meetings, really to make sure that we are all visible and that that we say our names for Morgan when he helps us out with the meeting minutes and the recording. So we're excited to be tackling the backlog of pre-meeting minutes and sharing them in the coming weeks.
Thank you. So then we just have a lot of communications.
I read all the communications. I appreciate everybody who made them and who spoke tonight, and I move that we accept those communications.
Second.
Motion to accept, seconded, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Have our communications accepted. So we're on to item 6, which is our regular public forum, which is an opportunity for people to speak to us on the stage items other than the what we just did, the public hearing. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at a general public forum? Seeing none.
And I would just love to share it.
Sharon. We'll close the public forum. We're on to commissioner items. And I want to start with commissioner items. The hour is late and I don't know if people want to have this conversation now, but I know that there are concerns and I share some of them with particularly the length of our last meeting and other things related to that. Is this a discussion people want to have now? Our next meeting is going to be another joint committee meeting that will be chaired by Jean. And I will likely be attending that one, but I will most likely be attending it on Zoom. But do you want to do this discussion now or at our next meeting? At our next meeting.
I would like to do that now, because I have 2 commissioner items as well about the meeting, our last meeting.
All right, let me start a little bit on that meeting. It was a very long meeting. Our plan is to have these meetings, the joint meetings in particular, go from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. That meeting was very full because we had our panel of experts there, and then we had 2 items. And in my mind, the first item, so we needed to hear from our experts, and the first item was one where it seemed like, to me at least, because it was our first one, thing like that, and the way it was structured was really important to get a consensus from everybody. And that discussion took a lot longer than anticipated to get there. And when we're getting up to the second item, I checked in to see if people wanted to continue or if we could just deal with the first item and deal with the second item another time. Now, it's possible also to shorten some of our discussions, to cut people off more. I'm always hesitant to cut people off, but if that's what people want in our discussions, I could do that. I don't know that it's always worth it because I think, our meetings sometimes go a little bit longer, but I think the discussions are important, that people want to share what they have to say. But I'm happy. My take would, what I would prefer at that meeting was that we not deal with option number 2, that we postpone that and we'd be done after option number. But I know there's an urgency on trying to deal with the overall IC. But I question whether the time that we're allotting to our discussions is sufficient. I think that was also our first real substantive discussion on the items, and so it's possible that things will work quicker, but. And as always. We heard a lot of people repeating themselves. And sometimes there are nuances in the repeating and sometimes there's not, so. I mean, as chair, I'm happy if people would like to have me just cut people off. But I would want people, if that's the desire, for people to respect that. And so I really, so I open up our discussion with that, and I want to hear what people want, and what people think. Because in order to have shorter discussions, it takes one of a few things. It's either cutting people off or having less on our agenda is pretty much in. And if there are other ideas of how to do it quicker, I'm open to that as well, but. And so with that, I'd love to hear what you think, and I know I got some of your comments that I really appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks for bringing this up, and this is important to me, not just to, have a great discussion with this group, but also, as I mentioned before, I'm recovering from a concussion, and at the last meeting, I felt totally maxed out, and I really felt like I wished the meeting could have ended at 9. And I could have left, and I did leave from the first meeting. But I didn't feel like I should have to leave before us getting to vote on the items. So in my opinion, personally, I think, just creating time estimates for how long we think each of the items will take, and, if it's clear from the outset that it's, as we're in the discussion, that we are not gonna go within that time limit, then moving things to the next meeting. I think we have to treat it that way. And then I also am in favor of you cutting people off if they're repeating themselves. Or sometimes there are things that are relevant, but they're not relevant to the question that we're immediately trying to answer. And I think that, everyone in this room brings, and who's not here too, brings a lot of great knowledge to these topics, and a lot of passion for what we're talking about. And I think all of that information is really important, and particularly in the joint committee, I'd want to hear from the counselors too, who I don't often interact with. And just making sure that every person has a chance to contribute, and maybe doing just calling on. We've sometimes done that, if just calling on people for a straw poll more often in the process. Obviously it's a little more stilted and it doesn't make for conversation, but I think just to, get through things in a timely way, I think that is important.
Thanks for that, Julia, and appreciate your concussion situation. I've had a lot of friends with concussions. I know that very from other folks what that can be like. To me, the inclusionary zoning discussion is probably the most important discussion. The overall plan, just heard the most important discussion that we could be having since the neighborhood code discussion, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time. I think for me, part of what happened last time was we allocated 3 hours, and maybe that's too much, but that included a half hour reorg for at least some amount of time for reorg. I'm personally fine with going from 6 to 9, maybe if we take a break in between. But personally, I'm okay with that. And we went significantly beyond 9. I think as chair, you need to do a time check, kind of like what the city council has done in the past, which is when you reach the agreed upon time, check in with folks beforehand to see if there's any, ability to go beyond that. But to me, it's important. And if we can't get to a decision point on something, yes, defer it to the next meeting.
So on the time check, that's a place I want to check in on, because it's what I did tonight before this discussion as well. So I did a time check at the last meeting a couple times. People said, no, let's keep going. So what we could do when I was on the council, we made the change then to have a time certain ending for our meetings of 10:30. And so rather than doing a time check, should we continue? The meetings ended at 10:30 unless there was an affirmative vote by the council to continue. I don't know if we need to do that, but that would be a way to not just do a check and, it's like I did tonight, it's 8:30. Do you want to keep going for this discussion, or do you want to have this another time? It would be like, if these meetings that we have now are supposed to be done at 8:30, the meeting would be done at 8:30. You could finish up the item you're talking on, but the meeting would be done at 8:30 unless the commission as a whole voted to extend it.
I'm fine with that.
Can I ask a clarification question? When you're saying time check, are you saying time check so I'm hearing from Julia that at each section, for instance, last time we talked about proposal 1, that had been one section of the agenda or item on the agenda, followed by proposal 2. Is the aspect to have time checks at each of that allotted time period?
I think.
Or just at the end?
Well, I think what's being talked about are two separate things, and related. I think what Julia is talking about is saying on each item, let's put a proposed amount of time that we think that one will be. I think what Erhard is saying is the time checks, especially as we're getting close to the end of our meeting, to do the time checks. Are we still continuing? We could do it also for the individual items, but and the individual items might make sense. It's a little harder to do, like, break it down that granularly to know how long a meeting might take, but overall.
I think we should just allow more time for the individual items. I also think it would be helpful, and I know we don't have a whiteboard in here, but when stuff goes to the parking lot, it'd be so cool to see it there. So we know, and with, the group of people that we are working with, that it'd be important to know that we're heard, it's captured. And if we just have our focus, and then if there's like an hour or more left, then do the next one.
I volunteer to be the facilitator who writes on the whiteboard.
Order it up.
So it's good.
So let me tell you some of the things that I'll do, and then I have a question, because I don't know if we got the clarity on that. It sounds like I have permission, and I'm happy to do this, is to keep people more focused, especially on larger discussions. I mean, there are plenty of times, we have plenty of time to go off on tangents and do that kind of stuff. There are some meetings where we clearly don't have that luxury of time. And so for the meetings where we don't have the luxury of time, I will keep people more focused on the items at hand. If it's something that is a good broader discussion, I'll ask to set that discussion aside and come back to the discussion at hand. If I start hearing people repeating the same things, I'll remind them that they're repeating. And then the question I have is, and I don't know this works for our joint meetings because it's a different group of people involved, but for our meetings, do you want to have like a time certain that we end at 8:30 unless collectively we vote to extend it beyond that? I don't mind doing that, by the way. And it was really effective on the council when we started. I don't know how it's been lately, but I know at least at the beginning, it was really effective.
Yeah, when I was chairing the council, you often went way beyond 10.
I know. I know. And I don't remember if that came about when I was chair or when Jane was chair. It was one or the other, but
I seem to recall, I think Jane was the one that first started limiting public comment, when I was chair, public comment,
Yeah.
3 minutes, and later on it was 2.
No, I like that idea. I think it, you know, puts pressure, good pressure on us to have a full discussion within the time that we have.
I mean, I would, sorry.
I think just the meeting prior to this one, it felt like Jean was just hustling us along the whole time. And it felt, my perspective in that meeting was that the whole like point was to like just get through it. And I don't think that that is in service of our goal. And so I think it maybe a gentler hand would be appreciated, which I know you got very. That's interesting. I did not have that experience.
You didn't?
The one with Jean?
No.
Yeah, interesting.
I was
Did you?
like,
I did,
Did you?
okay.
but I've had 15 for years, so I know his style.
Gene is happy to talk as long as the night is.
That's my experience. All up to Jean.
Question though, didn't we decide that the meetings were gonna be 3-hour meetings?
yes, no, it was supposed to be till 9 and it went till about 9:20 or so.
Right. But going forward,
Going forward, they're gonna be till 9. The joint meetings will be.
and are they gonna start at 6? Is that the proposal?
Yes.
And I want to just call attention to a meeting sent Wednesday, July 8th to Planning Commission and IZ Working Group members that outlines the participation of the experts and extending meeting length as well as the proposed timeline from between 6, going from 6:15, 6:45 to 7:45 for both last meeting and the August 11th time, August 11th meeting, just to help us all understand the inclusion of the expert. So I'm happy to provide something similar or bring that back up to inboxes as needed.
Bring it back up to the.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's important for at least as staff to be clear as we can with the IZ experts as we're scheduling them out, helping them prepare and helping them just know what to expect.
So have we already decided that this time schedule of 2.5 to 3-hour meetings? Because I was gonna suggest that, what is the appetite for having more shorter meetings? Past couple times, we've had joint planning commission, city council ordinance committee meeting, sessions. They've gone on longer than expected. Like, is it productive after 8:30? Like, did you think the last meeting was productive?
It is a
What
challenge.
do you want to do? Have more meetings or fewer shorter meetings? Or longer meetings?
The city council ordinance committee is challenging to schedule time with, and
Understood.
that's, I think, the main driver of
Okay.
why we haven't had more frequent ones.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm fine with 6 to 9 or something. Maybe we have like a 10-minute break in between. At the midway point, but I also personally, I've been one of the proponents for having, some of the experts, in the room, and I do want to make sure that they have time. And, again, if we run, I think we need sort of nominal times for, for the individual agenda items. And, as Chair, Andy and Jean should certainly remind us when we're going over on those, on the individual ones, but ultimately, this is really important for the city. It's important to me personally, and I want to make sure that we have adequate discussion. And certainly if we're repeating ourselves, please, use a gentle touch. But I think we need to have the discussion.
Thank you all. This is really helpful. And Aaron, do you have something else?
I have 3 commissioner items. Are you guys ready?
No.
The first one, I know you guys are understaffed, but if you can get us that meeting stuff sooner than the afternoon, it's really, I didn't have time to read all of the public comment. Okay. Okay, the second one, expert panel. I appreciate it. I know it's a big deal to have experts come to a meeting. Their time's valuable. It's the summer, it's nice out. I found, and perhaps this was because I was online, but I found it really hard. It felt like a real scatter plot of what they were saying. And I appreciated the insights, but it was hard. I don't know. I found it more distracting. And so I'm not sure the idea I came up with, but again, this is making more work for the team, which we don't have to do, but just like having each of them answer the same question or speak to something super specific that we're talking about. Just to keep them a little bit in the same lane as they're giving us their perspectives from their different places, I think it would be very helpful for me. And I've had a few like coffees with people outside, talking about Izzy and like kind of where it came from and the history of it or whatever, different perspectives. And those have been super helpful, but in our meeting, I found it, was hard to follow what they were saying. And then I felt like it didn't really drive our goal of discussing the specific things.
It was hard to hear some of them in the room.
Yeah.
It was literally hard for me to hear, but it was also hard for me to like listen to what they were saying and then bring it to the two things we were talking about.
I can tell you that at least one of the people who's hard to hear has been reminded that they're really hard to hear.
Yeah.
Aaron, to your point, I think staff discussed prior to the meeting whether or not it was worth having questions. We weren't asked any questions by working group members in advance of the meeting, so we didn't really have a lot to prepare. And we went back and forth on whether or not we should prepare questions in advance, what type of questions. I think it'd be really helpful, and I'll include this in my email to the whole working group. If you have specific questions that you'd like for us to ask, help us help you.
Totally, and you can send it to them so they know what we're.
And that meeting with the panel of experts, that was, the first part of it was just them introducing themselves and giving their broad overview. Once that first part of the discussion went, then mostly, and there could be a better job of keeping a focus on this, mostly they were just answering questions. And not always did everyone answer, but those who had a response to a question was put out there. And that's a place where, like, so going forward, I don't think they're going to have to do the general input like what they did, presentation. But I think the focus could be much more on just when questions come up to be able to answer those questions. That's a good point.
I want to disagree just a little bit, and say that I think that some of the information, that the experts provided, outside of the specific, things that we wanted to hear from them about was good for general background. Maybe, I'm sorry, it didn't feel that way to you, and maybe some of the conversations you've had with them separately have been helpful, but I think that there is some background that those of us who have kind of, I don't say newer to Burlington or newer to the housing crisis. I just think there was some really important background that some of them, from their perspective, having worked on city municipal policy and housing policy in Burlington for 40 years, was important to share.
I love that. It was hard for me in the way you built something.
Yeah, I know it's pretty scattered. They definitely had different things to say. There's different areas of expertise within those. I mean, we had private sector for-profit developers, we had nonprofit developers, and some of them were definitely not going to weigh in on each of the granular questions that we might otherwise have.
Okay, and the last one was, at some point we were discussing, so we're talking about the waterfront. Do you guys remember this part? And the 25% or no, having just not be a special zone. And we were discussing removing Cambrian Rise from the chart. And that just felt really random to me. And again, maybe it's because I was online and I couldn't hear everything, but it just felt like a very arbitrary thing. Like, we're talking about the waterfront district and then you guys were talking about redefining what, anyway, do you guys remember this chart?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just felt like that just felt completely random based on the conversation we were having. And it didn't feel like you guys had been proposing oh, we should remove this for A, B, and C. Maybe
It is
these-
in the proposal.
It is in the
It is in the
proposal.
proposal.
Sorry about that.
No, you're totally fine. I
Then you
think
can
that
ignore my
at
comment,
that
and I
point,
did not.
at that point in the evening, I think that it had gotten pretty late and we were.
Scattered.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that was.
We were also trying to hurry up and get some comments on that before, like, because we were already.
At the over part, so it was in the last.
Yeah.
So we're.
So you guys can ignore that comment.
After 9.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, here we are again.
I think, just my last ask is, as we're talking about reallocating that last meeting, I think we spent a lot of time on proposal 1 and not a lot of time on proposal 2. And just wanted to make sure that we're balancing the time allocated for the discussions, would be helpful.
And that's why I, at that point, suggested that we delay working on item 2, because item 1 did take a lot of time and a lot of thought. Everybody wanted to weigh in on that several times, and there wasn't clarity on the direction it was going in. There was a lot more clarity on where the proposal 2 was going to be. So my take, as we were around 8:45 or something, was let's hold off item proposal 2 until the next meeting. But there was a desire to get it all in, because it was clear that wasn't going over. And yeah, it's a little after 9, so unless there's any further, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion, second.
Wait, can we say it out loud for Morgan? Just who motioned and who?
Oh,
Yeah.
Erhard, motion, Alex, second.
Great.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned.